Observing the swift defeat of an invading army, the king smirks. He feels his country has been greatly underestimated, considering the enemy attacked with a mere 1,000 troops. He turns to his formidable commanders, asking if they share his sentiment. He declares that now is the time. For the first time in several years, they will come together for the unveiling of the 8 Grand Corps. With a determined grin, he rallies his forces, proclaiming that it is time for them to get fancy. His vast army responds as one, a sea of spears and armor standing at the ready. This world is part of Tactics Chronicle, a 4th-generation virtual reality game. Though it's a state management RPG, a less common genre, it became popular for its incredibly realistic representation of a fantasy world. The player recalls his first moments in the game, feeling the wind and smelling the earth. Overwhelmed with excitement, he clenched his fists, declaring the start of his adventure to build a dream nation. Years later, that dream is a reality. The king stands on a balcony, overlooking his magnificent capital city and the vast army assembled below. A commander orders the troops to line up. With a unified shout, the soldiers salute their king. Helion, the king of Alchimera, beams with pride, calling the sight spectacular. After many hardships, his nation has grown into a superpower. It is now celebrating the 150th anniversary of its founding. He is deeply moved, seeing the results of his hard work in creating a nation of non-human NPCs. Still, he feels unfulfilled by the recent orc raid, where the enemy surrendered too easily. Just then, a knock at the door signals an expected arrival. He calls for them to enter. A woman with fox ears enters, announcing to Helion that preparations for the national celebration are complete and he should proceed to the platform. He thanks her and issues the command to move. This interaction is possible through the game's keyword system, which allows players to communicate with NPCs. She acknowledges that she has understood. He issues the command to follow him. Helion looks at Reeve, one of his commanders, and recalls her humble beginnings. When he first started playing, he received 3 NPCs from a gacha pull. Reeve was just a low-rank species, alongside a low-rank demon cat and a rare elf. Those 3 have since become commanders of the nation's first 3 corps, and along with the other NPCs he acquired, the strongest among them now lead the 8 Grand Corps of Alchimera. He admits to himself that he's feeling sentimental, having personally trained them all into first-class warriors, likely due to the significance of the festival. He quickly dismisses the feeling, reminding himself it is just a role-playing game, and that he has not even prepared a speech. As he gazes out, he falls silent, his expression shifting. Suddenly, a violent tremor shakes the entire hall, throwing Helion and Reeve off their feet. Stunned and disoriented, Helion cries out, demanding to know what is happening. The entire capital city is rocked by the violent shaking. Soldiers look on in alarm. Thrown to the ground, Helion is disoriented. He wonders aloud if this is a game bug or some kind of natural disaster event, frustrated by the timing. Reeve rushes to his side, asking if he is hurt, but he quickly reassures her that he is fine. Getting to his feet, Helion looks out from the balcony and is met with a shocking sight. A vast forest now surrounds the area where the familiar terrain should be. Seeing that the kingdom itself is still standing, he deduces it is not a typical natural disaster event. He confirms that this does not look like a natural disaster. He speculates that it could be the effect of powerful terrain-altering magic, since the 3rd and 4th Corps are stationed in the capital. Deciding to take action, he orders a surprised Reeve to return to the office for now. Rushing back inside, Helion tries to use a command orb to contact the nearest base and its commander. The orb remains dark, it is inaccessible. Frustrated, he decides to try opening the map instead. A holographic map of the capital appears before him. He is horrified to see there are no bases indicated, and the entire area outside the city is grayed out as an unexplored territory. The shocking realization dawns on him. This must be a forced transfer event, sending them to an entirely new, unknown map. He struggles to process the situation. Forced transfers are rare and terrible events, but he has never heard of an entire capital being moved. Reeve adds that the game's company is notorious for its bad sense, which could explain such a bizarre event. Seeing his distress, she calls out his name with concern. Helion notes Reeve's fear, finding it strange for her brave character, which convinces him this is a highly difficult event. Snapping out of his thoughts, he confirms to Reeve that their capital has been forcibly transferred and orders her to assess the kingdom's current state. He will contact the other commanders to gather as much information as possible. Steeling herself, Reeve acknowledges the order. She hurries off to carry out his command. With his plan in motion, Hellion turns to his console, opening the tactical windows to prepare orders. He will give orders to each of the corps and let the event begin. Hellion declares an emergency, suspending the nation-founding celebration festival. He commands everyone to follow his orders to deal with the unfolding crisis, specifically instructing the 1st Division, led by Lev, to remain as his assistant. The 2nd Division is to ensure the safety of the citizens and maintain order. The 3rd Division is tasked with treating the wounded and maintaining the capital's barrier. The 4th Division is to investigate the surrounding area. The 5th Division will assist with emergency aid for citizens and damaged homes. The 6th Division will cooperate with the 4th to gather information. The 7th will handle facility repairs. The 8th will conduct aerial surveillance. His final, overarching command is to understand the situation, calm the people, and under no circumstances provoke outside countries. Now alone in the throne room, Hellion waits for the reports to come in. He thinks to himself that if this is some kind of poorly designed event, he will file a complaint. His thoughts are interrupted when he checks a system interface and realizes with confusion that no one else appears to be online. A knock at the door announces Lev's arrival. Hellion grants her entry. She steps into the room, ready to report on the current situation. Hellion asks if the situation is bad, and Lev confirms it's a complicated and unprecedented event. She begins her report, stating that the capital is now completely surrounded by a forest. Furthermore, the 6th Division has determined the forest has an illusion effect, making it difficult to scout from within the capital's barrier. Pondering the illusion effect, Hellion suggests sending personnel from the 4th Division to reinvestigate. Lev surprises him by stating the commander has already done so. Taking this into account, he decides to form a temporary investigation team centered around the elves. Lev acknowledges the order, and he seems to ponder if it will be enough. Hellion is suddenly taken aback by her response. Lev continues with the next report from the 8th Division's aerial reconnaissance. They discovered that the forest is less dense to the north. However, further confirmation from within the barrier is difficult. Upon hearing this, Hellion utters Lev's name in stunned disbelief. Lev explains that the dragons had complained about the orders, so she had to strike them to maintain discipline. Hellion frantically tries to interrupt, shouting her name, but she continues her report. She finally pauses to ask him what's wrong. The reason for Hellion's shock becomes apparent. He asks Lev if he had used any specific keywords to prompt her responses. Lev, utterly confused, asks what keywords are. The impossible truth crashes down on him. He tries to explain he was just talking to himself, but she apologizes, thinking his words were an order. He realizes an NPC is replying on its own, without any keywords. Seeing his distress, Lev asks if she said something unnecessary. Hellion's mind races as he tries to contact the game master. He gets no response, fueling his panic. Lev notices his poor condition and asks if he is okay. In a desperate move to confirm what he's experiencing, Hellion reaches out and gently touches Lev's cheek. The action startles them both. The moment of contact is silent but profound, sending a wave of shock through Hellion as he processes the sensation. As a blush spreads across Lev's face, she is left flustered. Hellion's mind reels in disbelief. This is impossible, he thinks. There is no way this can be happening. He reflects on the game's full sensory system, which allows players to feel touch and warmth, but recognizes those as artificial senses. Yet he can feel Lev's breath, see her cheeks turning red, and even smell a faint, sweet scent. The experience is far too real. Trying to make sense of it all, Hellion considers 3 possible theories. His first theory is that a sudden version upgrade was implemented in the game. This upgrade would have evolved the AIs and improved the sensory system to a point indistinguishable from reality. His second theory is that this is all a grand-scale prank by the developers, and he is actually in reality with a cosplayer. And his third theory is a classic one from old novels. He has been transported into another world, an isekai. The concept of an isekai transfer seems to strike a chord. The realization leaves him in a state of shock. Seeing his distress, Lev urges him to take a seat and offers to call for the 3rd Division commander. Hellion sharply refuses her help, insisting he is fine. After she reluctantly leaves, telling him to take care he is alone. He makes a final, desperate attempt to escape by initiating an immediate emergency logout. The system displays a stark, access denied message. There is no reaction, he is trapped. A strange calm settles over Hellion. He remembers the excitement he felt when the game was first released. The words he shouted back then, declaring the start of his adventure, now take on a profound and heavy new meaning in this unbelievable situation. In the fantasy SRPG Tactics Chronicle, the gameplay loop is unique. Unlike normal war games, the player's avatar, the king, has zero combat power and cannot grow stronger. Their physical abilities are on par with or even lower than regular humans. In this world, only the subordinates are strong, making the kings the weakest units on the battlefield. Before his throne, King Hellion looks out at his assembled division commanders. Leave, the 1st Division commander, announces that by the king's order, all commanders have arrived. They kneel before him. Hellion acknowledges them, thanking them for gathering and bidding them to raise their heads. Seated on his throne, Hellion states that while he hasn't seen some of them in a while, there is no time for a reunion and he must get straight to the point. Internally, he reminds himself to maintain the speech and posture of a noble king. He then calls upon Balan to explain the anomalies that have befallen the kingdom. Balan, the 2nd Division commander, reports on the situation. He confirms that security was not an issue during the incident, and though several people were injured, the citizens have since regained their composure. Hellion reflects on Balan's character traits, chivalric spirit and disciplined, which make him the most suitable person to entrust with maintaining order. Satisfied, Hellion thanks him and turns to Eltina for her report. Eltina, the 3rd Division commander, steps forward to explain. She reports that all the injured have been treated by her 3rd Division's medical unit. More alarmingly, she notes that the main road from the outer wall's gate has vanished, and the entire area outside the city is now covered by a dense forest. Hellion thinks about Eltina's compassionate and cooperative nature, noting that NPCs other than Leave now possess an ego. Eltina continues her report, adding that the forest seems to have an illusion effect, which she was unfortunately unable to break through. Pondering this, Hellion decides they must assume the kingdom is unknown to the outside world. He declares their goal is to investigate the surroundings while remaining hidden. Internally, he worries this cautious plan makes him look like a coward. He then turns to Leave and asks if the 4th Division's elite magicians can break the forest's illusion. Leave relays a report from the 4th Division, explaining that it will take time to analyze the unfamiliar magic system. However, she adds that the commander also suggested a brute force solution, erasing the entire forest with powerful ritual or topographical magic. Hellion immediately forbids such a rash action, stating that using brute force would expose their existence to any potential threats in the area. Leave accepts his command, saying she will inform the commander that Hellion has issued an official ban on the plan. Hellion observes Leave's tale, noting that while she appears dignified, her tale reveals her true mood, which he finds helpful. He commends her for a job well done, and she thanks him. Internally, he breathes a sigh of relief. He reflects on why he pays such close attention to his subordinates' expressions. In this game, rebellion is a system mechanic. If a unit's happiness and loyalty fall too low, they might incite a rebellion. The thought of a rebellion, a fight between strong monsters and a weak human like himself, is terrifying. Shaking off the thought, he decides they must investigate on foot to avoid provoking foreign countries. He turns and entrusts the investigation to the 6th Division commander. The commander, Camilla, vows that her division will give it their all. Camilla, the 6th Division commander, confirms there is a problem with the request to investigate the forest. Hellion questions what the problem could be. Her division, while unrivaled in information gathering during the Cold War, has a weakness. With an apology, she admits to a lack of power for this specific task. Camilla explains that her division, including herself, has never explored unknown areas, and thus she has no confidence in accomplishing the mission. Hellion realizes his mistake. Camilla clarifies that her division specializes in espionage, which is a different skill set entirely. Camilla clarifies that her division specializes in espionage against enemy nations, making them ill-suited for exploring uncharted territory. Flustered, she adds that if no one else is available, her 6th Division will still try to do something about it. King Hellion, however, validates her concern. He warmly thanks Camilla for her honest advice, stating he prefers it in these situations. Camilla is moved by her lord's words. Internally, Hellion tells himself to calm down and act like a king. He asks Leave, Balan, and Eltina if they recall a past investigation of an unexplored area. The 3 commanders confirm they remember. Hellion decides to first send a small, elite team to investigate before committing to a larger plan. Hellion issues his orders. Leave and Eltina will investigate the unexplored areas, while Balan will maintain order in the kingdom. He reflects that they have all grown stronger and feels confident that the two can handle the mission. He tells Lev and Eltina not to fret, remarking that the only difference from their first expedition is that Balan won't be with them. This statement, however, seems to startle them. A moment later, Hellion himself looks confused, realizing he may have misspoken. He orders the 6th Division to continue gathering domestic intelligence while Lev and Eltina prepare to depart in 15 minutes. Lev and Eltina acknowledge the order. As he dismisses his subordinates, he wonders if he said something wrong to make them more anxious. He formally dismisses the rest of them to their duties. The commanders watch with tense expressions as their king departs. As he walks away, Hellion resolves to himself that he must simply keep moving forward. Behind him, his commanders remain kneeling in the silent throne room. Once the king is gone, Camilla lets out a sigh of relief. She gushes over how elegant her lord was, wishing she could have talked with him more. Balan sternly calls her imprudent, but Camilla retorts that she specified her wish was for a different situation. Camilla complains to Balan that he is being unfair, mentioning it has been 3 years since her last audience with the king. Balan replies that it cannot be helped due to the strong personalities of the other commanders. He states that only the first 3 are considered decent enough to be stationed in the capital. Camilla scoffs at the notion. She tells Balan that Lev's hobbies are far from decent, a fact he might not know as a man. She then suggests that the same is likely true for Eltina. Hearing this, Eltina turns with a sweet smile and asks Camilla just what she is implying. As Balan asks for an explanation, Camilla insists there is nothing to explain. Eltina, however, maintains her serene smile and utters a single chilling command. She orders Camilla to kneel, leaving the 6th Division commander shocked. Eltina's smile becomes menacing as she repeats her command. Terrified, Camilla can only utter her name. Eltina demands to know exactly what Camilla meant when she said it was probably the same for her. Camilla tries to explain that she was referring to Eltina's preference for women, but Eltina dismisses it as misleading. She clarifies that while she likes men, she also enjoys cuddling cute girls. Camilla is horrified, thinking that this is not normal at all. Eltina then adds that she once heard His Majesty say something similar, shocking Camilla even more. A flashback shows Hellion nervously insisting he was just joking about a game. Eltina then continues her explanation, musing that a girl's expression when she is about to cry is precious. With a look of pure bliss, she declares that there is nothing cuter than a girl on the verge of tears. Terrified, Camilla stammers, calling for Balan. However, Balan ignores her and turns to Lev, asking if something is on her mind. Lev denies it at first. She then admits that she feels something is off about the investigation mission outside the kingdom. Lev looks toward the now empty throne, her unease stemming from the words of Hellion Sama. The other commanders look on, sharing in the quiet apprehension. Eltina confirms that she and Lev share the same thought. Lev is relieved that it wasn't just her imagination. Eltina then proposes sending a messenger, seeking approval from Supreme Commander Lev. Lev readily allows it. Lev turns to Eltina to confess something. She admits that during the forced transfer she was bewildered and out of concern for Hellion Sama's safety, intervened unnecessarily. This action, she recalls, displeased the king. Despite this, she affirms her unwavering belief that he is a great king, the true king of Archmera. Lev concludes that their duty is simply to obey his orders and become the power that opens his path. Eltina reassures her, stating that it was not wrong to be concerned for His Majesty. Lev apologizes, saying she just needed to get it off her chest, and Eltina tells her not to worry. Meanwhile, King Hellion sits alone on his throne, berating himself. He feels he messed up, having tried his best to act like a king but making too many mistakes. He resolves to start over with what he can and to think more carefully before sending his 2 commanders off. Having decided on a course of action, Hellion resolves to go to the North Gate to observe things himself. He remembers a professor's advice that observation is necessary for leaders, musing that he never expected to become a king before the age of 20. His thoughts are interrupted as something catches his attention. He steps out onto a balcony to find a massive army assembled below, ready for a grand send-off. Hellion is shocked, wondering why there is such a flashy display just for 2 commanders. Lev and Eltina appear before him. They announce that their preparations are complete, and Eltina offers to take his cloak. As his cloak is removed, Hellion is utterly bewildered, questioning what is happening. Lev and Eltina pledge their undying loyalty, vowing to protect him and serve the kingdom. All the while, Hellion is being dressed by attendants, internally panicking and wondering why they are changing his clothes. As the royal regalia is placed upon him, the dreadful realization dawns on Hellion. The preparations are not for his commanders but for him. It's as if the king himself is leading the expedition. The source of the misunderstanding becomes clear. His words, meant to reassure, were misinterpreted. When he said the only difference from their first expedition was that Balan would not be there, they assumed it meant that Hellion, who had joined them on that first journey, would be coming along this time as well. A commander roars to the assembled troops, ordering them to take heed and raise their swords as he announces that as of this moment, His Majesty the King will personally lead the expedition team. Riding alongside his commanders, Hellion feels defeated. He sees Leave's triumphant smile. He hates himself for trying to act cool, thinking how it takes him back to when he last explored an uncharted area. As they ride out, Hellion frantically questions his commanders, asking why this is happening and if he did something wrong. He insists it is strange for the king to lead an expedition and begs for someone to stop them, but Leave and Eltina simply affirm their readiness. Swept up in the momentum, Hellion gives the order to advance. As they journey through a dense forest, Hellion grows weary, remarking that they have been walking for an hour without any change in the scenery. He begins to suspect he has lost his sense of direction, realizing the confusing terrain is compounded by an illusion effect. Suddenly, a flash of light tears through the woods, startling the group. The illusionary effect shatters around them. Eltina informs a surprised Hellion that the forest's magic has weakened. Hellion wonders if they have crossed a boundary line, leaving the illusion's influence behind them. Leave cautiously leads the way into the seemingly normal part of the forest. Their progress is halted when Leave warns Hellion Sama that something is approaching. A moment later, a massive, snarling wolf emerges from the trees, blocking their path. Hellion observes the 5-meter-tall giant wolf, snarling with clear hostility. He is taken aback that such a powerful-looking monster is their very first encounter. However, before a fight can begin, Leave simply glares intensely at the beast. Overwhelmed by her powerful presence, the giant wolf whimpers in fear and turns to flee. Leave casually dismisses the creature as a small fry, explaining that she merely directed her killing intent towards it. Hellion is once again reminded of her formidable power as Managarm Leave, the pinnacle of lycanthropes. He reflects that it is only natural for his personal assistant, a subordinate he raised with great care, to be far stronger than a common stray wolf. The brief respite ends when Eltina urgently alerts His Majesty to movement northeast of them. Hellion immediately opens his tactical window, accessing a map that displays the presences Eltina has detected through their shared data link. The map displays 2 white dots, indicating unknown entities. Hellion observes that there are 2 of them moving together, with 1 in the lead. Eltina confirms they are not heading towards the group. She adds a worrying detail: she can hear a faint scream coming from the individual being led. Understanding that someone is in danger, Hellion urgently commands them to hurry. His commanders acknowledge, and the 3 of them race through the forest. Elsewhere in the forest, a hooded girl runs for her life, utterly exhausted and struggling to keep up with the person ahead. They are being relentlessly pursued by a ferocious, armored wolf-like beast. Upon spotting the figures in the distance, Hellion prepares for action. He commands Eltina to intercept the pursuing monster. She immediately acknowledges the order and prepares to cast a spell, chanting for the wind to become a running blade. With a swift gust of wind, Eltina's Wind Edge spell strikes the beast, slicing it apart in an instant. The monster is dispatched with such ease. Hellion and Leave watch in astonishment. Hellion is particularly surprised, questioning how a seemingly simple, low-tier magic spell could have been so effective. Confirming the monster is dead, Hellion wonders if it was actually a high-tier spell. Leave observes that it was cast without a catalyst, making it even more impressive. Hellion then cautiously approaches the girl they saved, asking if she is hurt. As the girl looks up, Hellion is surprised to realize that she is an elf. The elf girl nervously pulls up her hood. She then thanks them for saving her. Hellion observes her cautious demeanor, wondering if she is wary of them. Hellion reassures the girl, explaining that they were simply lost travelers who heard her scream and were glad to have made it in time. The rescued elf observes her saviors, noting that they appear to be an elf and a Therianthrope. Leave introduces herself as a Therianthrope, and Eltina introduces herself as an elf, hoping to put the girl at ease. The rescued elf, however, remains silent and guarded. Recognizing his own social awkwardness, Hellion decides to let Eltina take the lead. He believes the girl will feel safer talking to another elf. To Hellion's dismay, Eltina apologizes to him, explaining that elves are generally not good with people. Hearing this, the rescued girl curtly states she will pass on the conversation. Hellion feels emotionally betrayed by his hopes in Eltina. Resigning himself to the task, Hellion prepares to speak. However, the girl interrupts, pointedly asking if his companions are his slaves. Startled, Hellion quickly denies her accusation, insisting they are his traveling companions. The girl then asks why he would save her. He is surprised when she reveals she is a half-elf. She points to her slightly rounded ear as proof. She confirms her half-elf heritage and asks if he now regrets saving her. Hellion is completely confused by her question. Hellion asks why he would possibly regret saving her. His response catches the girl off guard. She explains her assumption that he only helped because he thought she was a full elf. Still confused, Hellion asks what the problem is with being a half-elf. Before the girl can answer, a new voice interjects, stating that the answer should go without saying. An armored elf appears, holding the head of the monster Eltina killed. He declares that the problem with half-elves is that they are a tainted race. The armored elf remarks that he cannot believe his hound was killed so easily, concluding that Hellion and his companions are no ordinary people. The armored elf questions if Hellion is a human, finding it strange to see one so close to the abyss. Ignoring the elf, the half-elf girl asks Hellion about something he said earlier, but he dismisses her question. Hellion asks what the elf means by a tainted race. The elf smirks, surprised that Hellion doesn't know. He explains that the girl is a half-elf, unlike pure elves who are loved by their gods and spirits. He elaborates that a half-elf is a fallen being born from an elf and a human, whom he deems an impure and barbaric race. The half-elf girl vehemently denies his claim, insisting they are not tainted. Enraged by her defiance, the armored elf screams that her words are nonsense. He yells that a mere tainted being shouldn't speak, claiming the sound of her voice makes his ears rot. Hellion observes that while the elf looks dignified, his expression of disgust is just as unsightly as a human's. This troubles him as in the game he knew, a human unit didn't exist, the human race was exclusively for kings. He reflects that while the world has many demi-humans, there were no humans aside from players. Setting that aside, Hellion decides to focus on gathering information and asks the elf why he's pursuing the girl. The elf replies smugly that it's just for fun. The elf callously explains that after he destroyed the half-elf city, some managed to escape like sewer rats, and he is now using them as target practice for his hounds. Hellion is shocked to learn the elf destroyed an entire city, as the elf continues his tirade against the tainted race of half-elves. He declares that the pure elves will make good use of the city. However, this will only happen after they finish purging the half-elves' tainted blood. Hellion notes the elf's arrogance, despite being outnumbered. Hellion feigns ignorance, apologizing and explaining that he is merely a traveler unfamiliar with the area. The elf seems amused that he would admit his ignorance. He then remarks that while Hellion may be a monkey, he appears to be an exceptional one. The elf declares that it's too late for apologies. As punishment for the crime of interfering with his hunt, Hellion and his group must die. The half-elf girl finally snaps, shouting that Hellion is a human, not a monkey. She begs the elf to leave them be, explaining they were only trying to live peacefully on the forest's edge. She cries out that he drove them into the dangerous wilderness near the abyss. In tears, she questions why this is happening when they were just desperately trying to live, but the enraged elf screams at her to stop talking. Having had enough, the elf unleashes a powerful attack, vowing to silence the girl for eternity as his hounds charge forward. Caught in the attack, Hellion questions his own actions, wondering if he is trying to get himself killed. The sheer noise from the deafening wind feels like it's crushing his ears. He deeply regrets his choices, but knows it's too late to back down. As he braces for impact, a magical barrier of wind protection suddenly envelops him and the girl, shielding them from the attack. The protection came from Eltina, who simultaneously casts Liana Bind to restrain their attacker. Trapped by the thorny vines, the furious elf orders his loyal hounds to kill the caster. Hellion realizes that all this time, his companions had understood his intention to gather information and endured the unbearable insults. He understood now that Eltina had been masking her hostility with a smile, while Leave suppressed her urge to attack. However, now that they are under direct attack, holding back is no longer an option. As Leave prepares to strike the final blow against the restrained elf, a desperate cry rings out. Hellion urgently commands Leave to wait, halting her attack just in time. The bound elf, caught off guard by the sudden intervention, struggles in his binds, demanding to know what is happening. Hellion calmly informs him that they have no wish to fight and will let him go, reminding the elf that he was the one who attacked them first. Hellion states they were simply protecting themselves. The elf, incensed at being shown mercy, sputters in disbelief. He furiously questions how a mere human dares to order him around. The elf proudly announces his title as the Hunter Chief of Noblewood. Unimpressed, Hellion repeats his command for the elf to leave. He asks if the elf truly wants to escalate the situation. Seething with humiliation, the Hunter Chief turns and retreats. He disappears into the dense forest. Hellion and his companions watch as he disappears from sight. Hellion reflects on how dangerous that was. He had almost been killed. He realizes he cannot afford to fight other forces while still knowing so little about this world. As he contemplates the close call, the half-elf girl approaches and thanks him once again for saving her. He stammers that he's glad she's okay. Inwardly, he panics, realizing he just ordered leave around as if he were her superior. This could ruin their cover story of being simple travelers. He quickly tries to salvage the situation, laughing awkwardly and claiming he's just a handyman who can't fight and that Leave and Eltina are his bodyguards. After a moment of silence, the half-elf girl bursts into laughter. She explains that she found it funny how he acted so tough in front of the elf, only to get flustered in front of her. Hellion can only apologize. She apologizes for laughing and tells him not to worry, encouraging him to speak to her as forcefully as he did with the other elf. She then formally introduces herself as Leifa and thanks him again. Hellion deflects the gratitude, saying they were simply protecting themselves. Leifa insists that it doesn't change the fact that they saved her, and she wants to properly express her thanks. Hellion asks what she wants. She asks for his name. Hellion apologizes for not introducing himself earlier and tells her his name is Hellion. Leifa smiles and reintroduces herself once more. They shake hands. As their group walks on, Hellion asks who the elf was. Leifa explains that he was from the Noblewood Kingdom, which attacked their city. Her own country, Latestwood, is a small city-state with a few settlements. Leifa explains that Latestwood was built about 30 years ago by a half-elf as a safe haven. Hellion remarks that this was quite recent. Leifa agrees, adding that the existence of half-elves only became widely known around the same time. She explains their numbers had rapidly increased about 100 years prior. She begins to recount the events of 100 years ago, when an interspecies war with humans broke out. Although the elvish army was winning at first due to surprise attacks, they were eventually overwhelmed by the large number of humans. The elves were forced to retreat into the Great Forest. 5 years later, the war reached a stalemate, and a ceasefire agreement was formed. Leifa then poses a somber question to Hellion. What does he think happened to the female elves captured during those 5 years? Leifa explains that because female elves are considered beautiful by humans, they were taken as spoils of war and treated as sexual slaves by aristocrats and soldiers. When the ceasefire was finally made, most of the elves were returned, but among them were many who gave birth to babies conceived by their human captors. With a heavy heart, Leifa reveals that those people were her ancestors. She clarifies that because elves hate humans, the resulting half-elves were never accepted, as the elves felt disgust knowing human blood flowed inside them. Rather, the elves began to hate the half-elves even more than the humans. Hellion asks how humans reacted. Leifa replies that it was much the same, though some humans treated them better than the elves ever did. However, she admits that not all humans were kind, as some tried to kidnap them. Hellion is troubled by this revelation. In the game he knew, Tactics Chronicle, there was no such history. In the game, there was no such war 100 years ago, nor was there an NPC group of elves like this. Hellion surmises that the elves from Noblewood are targeting the half-elves from Latestwood. Leifa confirms this. She explains that their capital was situated near human territory, making them a convenient shield for the elves in a potential war. But 3 weeks ago, the forces from Noblewood attacked them without warning. Hellion asks if she knows the reason, but Leifa does not. She only knows that Noblewood proclaimed they were governing the city correctly through noble bloodlines, a claim she doesn't believe. Hellion wonders if the elves even have a chance of winning against the humans now. Leifa concedes it would be difficult. He muses that there shouldn't be much difference in their military strength compared to 100 years ago. Leifa adds that if they only wanted to claim territory, they wouldn't have chased after those who escaped. Hellion deduces that the attack on her capital without a declaration of war means they were targeting someone specific, likely their leader. Leifa explains that their country has a matrilineal royalty system, so they were led by a queen. However, during the attack, the queen and the prince consort went missing. She believes her queen, who was an influential unifier and the country's founder, has likely been captured but is still alive. Hellion understands the gravity of the situation. Not only was their capital taken, but their leader is also missing. They are completely losing the war. He considers that the only way to deal with this would be to gather the escapees and form an alliance for a counterattack. However, he acknowledges this will be difficult, as half-elves are discriminated against by both elves and humans. This discrimination is precisely why they had to build their own country, as they had no one to rely on. Leifa then asks the group to wait for a bit. She explains that they will arrive at their settlement in about 10 minutes. She wants to go ahead to let them know of their arrival to avoid causing a panic, which Hellion agrees would be helpful. As Leifa steps away, Eltina quietly warns Hellion to be on his guard. She points out that Leifa is creating a magic circle on the ground. Leifa begins to chant in an ethereal voice, beseeching a friend to come to her. Hellion recognizes it as summoning magic, but the chant is completely unfamiliar to him. He notes that the more information he gathers, the more this world deviates from his knowledge of the game. Continuing her incantation, she calls upon her senior to use her voice as a guiding light and come to her side. She completes the spell to call fellow. A brilliant flash of light erupts from the magic circle, revealing a half-elf archer. Another half-elf nearby cries out Leifa's name in concern. The summoned archer Wenli immediately spots Hellion's group and draws her bow, shocked to see an elf. Leifa quickly intervenes, ordering Wenli to lower her bow and explaining that these travelers saved her. Though hesitant to accept a human and an elf, Wenli reluctantly obeys the command. Hellion is intrigued, wondering why Wenli addressed Leifa with the formal title of Sama. Leifa apologizes for her companion's improper behavior, explaining that the people in their settlement are on edge. Brushing it aside, Hellion asks her to tell them her full name. Leifa gladly agrees, revealing her full name is Leifa Rim Latestwood. She explains that they will soon reach her country, and as an individual and a member of royalty, she welcomes them. Leifa tells Hellion that if they walk a little farther, they will reach the settlement. Hellion notices figures perched in the trees ahead, observing their approach. The observers are revealed to be armed elves, warily watching the newcomers. The elven lookouts keep their bows trained on Hellion's approaching party. One of the elves questions whether Leifa should be letting strangers, especially an elf, into their settlement at such a time. The other elf counters that Leifa must have a reason, as she claimed they were her saviors, though she admits she doesn't know the full story. The group enters a sprawling settlement of tents and wooden structures built among massive trees. Hellion identifies the location as the settlement of Latestwood. Addressing the assembled villagers, Leifa introduces the newcomers as her saviors. She firmly states that disrespecting them is the same as disrespecting her and asks everyone to keep this in mind. The villagers listen to her announcement with expressions of surprise and curiosity. The villagers gossip about the group, remarking on seeing a real elf and a human with black hair and eyes, something they've never witnessed before. Hellion feels uncomfortably scrutinized, comparing the experience to being a panda in a zoo. Eltina quietly informs Hellion that their host, Leifa Rim Latestwood, is the queen's first daughter and therefore the heir to the throne. Because the current queen is missing, Leifa is uniting the citizens as the interim queen. Eltina adds that besides her missing parents, Leifa and her sister are the only ones related to the royal family. This information starts to explain why such an important person was alone in the middle of the forest. Now in a more private setting, Hellion asks Leifa if she was trying to rescue the queen. Leifa confirms his suspicion, admitting she was, but seems uncertain about the details. Leifa explains that since the elves from Noblewood are capturing people instead of killing them, she has reason to believe her parents are still alive. She reveals that in order to rescue them, she tried to sneak into enemy territory with an elite team. Hellion then asks why she was alone and what happened to her team. Leifa explains that the plan failed when the enemy found them, forcing a retreat. The others were captured so she could escape. As Hellion absorbs the information, Wenli interrupts, asking if she may speak with the guest. Wenli angrily accuses Hellion of asking too many questions and lacking courtesy towards Leifa-sama. She begins by formally thanking him for saving Leifa. However, she says his story doesn't make sense, questioning how they can be travelers yet so clueless about the area, and asks if they are really travelers at all. Hellion calmly raises a hand to placate the agitated elf. He looks at her directly, stating that he understands her concern. Hellion surmises that she probably suspects them of being spies for Noblewood. Wenli looks away, admitting she hadn't gone that far with her suspicions. Hellion confirms they are travelers, but adds that whether they are normal travelers is a bit of a vague question. A baffled Wenli demands to know what he means by that. Hellion calmly reveals that they came from the abyss. The elves react with shock and disbelief. Wenli immediately accuses them, asking if they are the demon lord's subordinates. Hellion casually replies that the existence of a demon lord in the abyss is news to him. He explains that judging by everyone's reactions, what they call the abyss must be the dangerous, dense forest they just came from. Hellion elaborates that they were suddenly transported to an unknown forest while exploring an old castle and subsequently wandered for 5 days. He concludes by stating that this is why they are clueless about the situation around here, and he wants them to understand that. Still suspicious, Wenli asks how they lasted 5 days in the forest. She points out that they do not appear to be carrying any luggage. Hellion confidently calls on Lev and Eltina, who eagerly confirm his account. They present small pouches, implying they possess a way to carry their necessities. The elves are stunned as Lev and Eltina produce a mountain of supplies from their seemingly small pouches. Wenli stares in disbelief, demanding to know what is happening and where everything came from. Eltina explains they found the items by chance while exploring some ruins. Hellion elaborates that they are storage items that can hold things far exceeding their size, though he doesn't understand the mechanics. Wenli connects the dots, realizing this is how they survived so long without any luggage, finding the explanation unbelievable. The bag is revealed to be a magic item called an item pouch. This high-quality version is considered a valuable item with more capacity than normal ones. However, this entire explanation is a carefully crafted performance by Hellion to escape their questioning. Hellion knew that claiming to be travelers would raise suspicion, so he used the impressive item pouch to divert their attention and dispel their doubts. He hopes the shocking revelation will prevent them from immediately noticing other suspicious things about him. He recognizes the gamble and knows he must control the conversation before they think more carefully. Just as Hellion plans his next move, a young elf girl bursts in, calling for her sister. Leifa is annoyed and shouts her sister's name, Lilifa. Leifa tells Lilifa she is in an important conversation and to come back later, while Hellion introduces the girl as Leifa's sister. Lilifa approaches Hellion and asks if he was the one who saved her sister from the elf. Hellion modestly denies it. He explains that he is weak and cannot fight, clarifying that his companions Lev and Eltina were the saviors. Lilifa thoughtfully considers his answer. Leifa apologizes for her sister and says she will scold her later, but Hellion tells her there is no need. Suddenly, Lilifa lands in very close to Hellion. Startled, he stammers as she asks him what is wrong. After a moment, Lilifa bluntly asks the traveler if he likes big-breasted girls. Leifa explodes, demanding to know what Lilifa is saying out of the blue. Unfazed, Lilifa explains her reasoning to a flustered Hellion. Since he is human, she figured he might like them big. Lilifa eagerly presses Hellion for an answer, asking him what he thinks of her chest. Flustered, Hellion admits he cannot really tell, though he thinks they are large for her age. Lilifa then proudly declares that hers are bigger than her sister's. A scream echoes from the tent. A short while later, a mortified Leifa apologizes to Hellion for her sister's behavior. Hellion reassures Leifa that it is okay and tells her not to worry. As he speaks, Lilifa intertwines their hands. Internally, Hellion acknowledges that while the girl's interruption stopped the questioning, it has created an awkward situation, and he needs to find a new topic of conversation. Trying to change the subject, Hellion asks for Lilifa's age, but she playfully challenges him to guess. He guesses around 13, but she cheerfully corrects him, revealing she is only 10 years old. Leifa explains that Lilifa's human blood is more dominant, so she looks her age, much to Hellion's surprise. Lilifa adds that, just like her mother, her breasts are going to get much bigger. Leifa is exasperated by her sister's comment, but Lilifa's attention shifts as she points out that Wenli is calling for her. Hellion looks over and confirms that Wenli is indeed running towards them. Leifa instructs Lilifa to guide Hellion around the settlement while she attends to something. She warns her sister not to cause any trouble before leaving with Wenli. As they depart, Hellion realizes he still has many questions and considers asking Lilifa instead. As Hellion turns to speak, Lilifa beats him to it, asking with a bright smile if he will marry her. The unexpected proposal leaves Hellion utterly speechless. A fox-eared woman is busy preparing a massive pot of stew for the settlement. Nearby elves wonder about the identity of the Ryanthrope cook, speculating if she is an adventurer or one of the travelers Leifasama mentioned. As Hellion observes the scene, he takes note of her actions. She carefully seasons the large meal with salt, cinnamon, and black pepper. With a command, she ignites the fire beneath the pot. Soon, an enticing aroma drifts through the camp. The smell catches the attention of the curious elves. A young elf girl, Lilifa, eagerly approaches the cook, whom she calls Dog One-san, asking if the meal is ready. The cook gently corrects her, saying she's not a dog, and offers the girl a sample of the nearly finished stew. Lilifa opens her mouth for a taste. Lilifa's face lights up with delight after tasting the food. The cook is glad she likes it and offers her a bowl. The girl asks if she can really have it, and the cook confirms it's an order from Hellion. Lilifa gratefully accepts, thanking the blessings of the divine tree. Her excitement spreads, and soon the other elves are drawn in by the promise of a delicious free meal. Lilifa enthusiastically encourages everyone to try the meal, proclaiming it's even better than the food from the castle. Watching the scene unfold, Hellion confirms his suspicions. He realizes the people are not eating properly and have a food shortage. It's a natural consequence of the settlement taking in more refugees from the capital than it can support. An elf woman thanks Hellion for providing the meal. He brushes it off, saying he only wants to help. Changing the subject, he asks about the nearby abyss, recalling a story about a demon lord. The elf confirms the legend, explaining that the abyss has long been considered a forbidden land, also known as the Forbidden Ethereal Realm. Hellion asks why the abyss is avoided. She reveals that demon beasts periodically emerge from there. These are powerful creatures that can defeat normal forest beasts, and subjugation units rarely succeed against them. The elf explains that most rampage and return to the abyss, prompting Hellion to wonder what happens to those that don't. The elf explains that for the forest dwellers, these beasts are like natural disasters, they can only wait for them to return to the abyss. Hellion silently wonders why the half-elves would build a city in such a dangerous place. He realizes that because the half-elves are persecuted, they can only build a base in this dangerous area. Hellion recalls she said no elves would approach the abyss, and asks if other races do. The elf agrees, explaining that some humans, called adventurers, would do that. She clarifies that they aim for special materials found inside the abyss. This is because demon beasts from the abyss have abundant magic power, and parts of their bodies can be processed into special materials. Hellion inquires if many adventurers visit Latestwood, to which the elf agrees, though she finds their actions beyond comprehension. However, she is grateful for their visits, as they trade valuable foreign currency when they stop by. Hellion agrees that any ruler would feel the same. He understands that trade is essential for growth, but then notices a distinct lack of adventurers in the settlement. The elf explains they are not here because a horde of demonic beasts attacked a neighboring border city a month ago. An emergency call was made, and all the adventurers went to the border city to deal with the large horde. She laments the terrible timing, as the elves from Noblewood attacked them just 3 weeks ago, right after the adventurers had departed. Hellion asks for clarification on the border city. The elf describes it as a human frontline city on the border that separates human territory and demon territory. It is also known as the Shield of Humanity. Hellion quietly absorbs this new information. Hellion reflects that while he expected this to a certain extent, he had never heard of such a story. He knows demons exist in Tactics Chronicle, as his 6th Division commander, Camilla, is a demon, but he has never heard of a demon territory. He wants to ask more, but his head is about to burst from all the new information. Observing the lively settlement, Hellion is glad to see that the meal he provided is being so well received. His eyes drift over to a pair of children, evidence of the various half-species that call this place home. Noticing some small children, Hellion asks if they are werecats, but Leifa clarifies that their small stature is because they are born from halflings. Hellion expresses his surprise at the presence of so many half-species, and especially dwarves. He questions Leifa, recalling that dwarves and elves do not get along, wondering if the same applies to half-elves. Leifa acknowledges that while the half-elves founded this country, there is more to their history. Leifa proudly explains that at the time of its founding, various species gathered and helped, making Latestwood a country built by everyone. Hellion listens intently to her story. She explains that as a powerless race with no one else to rely on, they have no choice but to work together. Leifa firmly states that it was precisely because they worked together that they managed to build their country. Moved by her words, Hellion tells her that he finds it to be an amazing country. Gazing over her people, Leifa declares with a smile that this country is her pride and joy. He continued his talk with Leifa until Leave had finished serving all the food. Hellion was concerned that Leifa might ask to borrow Leave and Eltina, but unexpectedly she never broached the topic. Instead, they engaged in small talk about their hobbies, favorite foods, and Leifa's childhood. He reflects that her ability to smile even in a difficult situation shows she has the caliber of a ruler. Hellion admits to himself that he is not confident he could act the same way if put in her position. Children excitedly ask Leave to play, and though Leifa tries to intervene, Leave happily agrees. His expression turning serious, Hellion commands his chat window to open. The window opens, addressed to his 2nd Division commander, Balan Zalfried. He was worried that communication wouldn't work past the abyss, but fortunately there are no such problems. He knows that from anyone else's point of view, it just looks like he is staring at the sky. He sends a message to his commander, reporting that he has successfully made contact with the locals and asking for a status update on his own forces. The calm is suddenly broken by the sound of a mug smashing against the ground. The sudden noise startles Lev. Eltina is also taken aback by the commotion. Hellion turns toward the sound, his expression shifting to one of dawning comprehension and dread. Leifa notices his strange behavior and calls out to him with concern. He recalls a critical game mechanic: when happiness and loyalty fall below a certain threshold, a rebellion might happen. He realizes with horror that in this game, rebellion is a built-in part of the system. A system notification appears before him, confirming his worst fear: a rebellion has occurred. A furious commander roars about how weak the soldiers are. He questions if the soldiers of Archmera can only do this much. The commander, Balan Zalfried, smirks sadistically, hoping his troops can provide some entertainment for him before their supreme leader returns. Suddenly, Hellion announces that he received an emergency message through a magic item and must leave immediately. Apologizing profusely, he promises to make amends later as he vanishes into the forest. A stunned Leifa calls out his name, but he is already gone. With Lev and Eltina at his side, Hellion races through the night, his mind fixed on the crisis unfolding back in his kingdom. He recalls the urgent message he sent through his command interface. His orders were clear: defend the throne room and ensure no one touches the throne until he returns. As Lev carries him at great speed, she apologizes for the undignified transport, but Hellion dismisses it, insisting they must return as soon as possible. His one consuming thought is that he cannot allow the throne to be taken. If the rebels succeed, the happiness and morale of the kingdom will plummet, and he will lose his kingly abilities. He knows that losing the throne would be a fatal blow. The rebellion occurred in the capital city, and if the rebels successfully take the throne, the revolution will be considered a success. When that happens, it signifies the end of the kingdom. Cursing the situation, Hellion grapples with the terrifying implications. A successful revolution means game over, and the data of the player who rules it will be erased completely. The line between game and reality blurs as he wonders what will happen to him. He questions if he is actually going to die, desperately wishing someone would tell him this is all just a dream. Meanwhile, the battle rages in the capital. Rebel forces clash violently with the kingdom's army, their roars echoing through the streets. At the heart of the fighting, the 5th Division commander, Gardi Bergilmir, effortlessly smashes through his opponents, finding the battle utterly boring. Gardi taunts the remaining rebels, declaring that if they truly want to stop him, they would need to bring someone as powerful as Lev. As Hellion's group nears the capital, Lev reports their imminent arrival, and Hellion asks Eltina if she can hear any fighting inside the castle. Eltina confirms the battle is contained to the bazaar, and the castle is safe for now. With no time to waste, Hellion orders Lev to head directly to the castle. They fly through the castle gates and race down the main hall. Lev confirms the order, and they make their way directly to the throne room. As they burst into the throne room, the royal guards announce the king's arrival. The guards command everyone to make way as the king passes. Ignoring the formalities, Hellion storms forward, demanding a report on the situation. The lion-like commander, startled by his master's sudden appearance, greets him. Hellion immediately asks for the situation, wanting to know if anyone has touched the throne. The commander reports that after receiving the order, they immediately moved to defend the throne, and no one has touched it. Furthermore, they have assembled an elite unit. Visibly relieved that the throne is secure, Hellion falls silent for a moment. He then turns his attention to his subordinates, asking about the status of the other commanders. His mind races, trying to determine who the traitor is. He knows Lev and Eltina are loyal allies, and he reasons that if Balan were the traitor, the throne would have been taken by now. That leaves the other commanders as potential suspects. Hellion considers the various personalities among his commanders, some of whom possess selfish, hedonistic, and arrogant traits. He knows one has a chaos tendency, prone to erratic actions. In contrast, Eltina's harmony nature leads her to resolve conflicts. He realizes that among his 8 commanders, there is even one with an evil tendency. The Lion commander reports that the 5th Division commander, Gardi, correctly assessed the need to engage the rebels and is leading his own forces along with part of the 6th Division at his own discretion. The other commanders, he adds, are moving according to Hellion's orders. Taken aback, Hellion asks for the identity of the rebels. The Lion commander roars in reply that it is the Ogre faction. He clarifies that it's the same group that attacked just before the founding festival and then surrendered. Back on the battlefield, a white-haired commander confronts Gardi, scolding him for using his subordinates in a way that causes so much damage to the surroundings. Gardi retorts that she should shut up, arguing that it's better to crush them so completely that they never dare to oppose them again. Hellion sits down, exhausted from the recent events. Balan approaches, asking if his master is all right, and Hellion reassures him that he is just tired. Nearby, Lev is also spent, explaining that she's relieved but too weak to stand after having desperately clung to Hellion. Balan observes Lev, remarking that she seems oddly happy. Lev quickly refutes this, questioning how she could possibly be happy when a rebellion has just occurred. She demands to know what made him think so. A commander reports to Hellion that the rebels have been dealt with, suggesting they survey the city. Hellion looks over the scene of the battle, reflecting that the Ogre faction was responsible. He muses that his own absence made their rebellion almost inevitable. As Hellion walks through the city, he is confronted by the gruesome aftermath. He finds the terrible spectacle to be far too realistic, unlike the game's regulated expressions of violence. The 5th Division commander, Gardi, proudly approaches his supreme leader, bellowing that he has dealt with the rebels, and Hellion calmly commends him for his good work. Gardi declares it was his fault for not preventing the rebellion, and says he is prepared for punishment. Hellion reassures him, saying he has done well and thanks him for protecting the capital. When Hellion asks about the rebel leader, Gardi points him out. Hellion approaches the body of the defeated Ogre leader, a massive, armored figure lying broken and bloodied on the ground. He stares down at the corpse. While finding the sight gruesome, Hellion acknowledges that this was the result he wanted. He forces himself not to look away. Nearby, Balan interrupts, chastising Gardi for speaking improperly to Hellion Sama. Gardi reacts with annoyance. Gardi retorts that the Supreme Leader allowed him to speak informally. Lev sharply cuts in, insisting there's a limit and that he must maintain an appearance of respect in front of the soldiers. Dismissing her, Gardi announces he has other things to do and turns to Lev. Lev tries to stop Gardi as he walks away. Eltina gently intervenes, telling the two that fighting is not good. Losing his patience, Hellion shouts for Lev and Gardi to stop playing around. Suddenly, the supposedly dead Ogre leader lunges forward, its eyes glowing with malevolent energy as it attacks Hellion. Hellion's eye widens in terror. His commanders can only look on in shock. Panic grips Hellion as he recalls that in Tactics Chronicle, the king is the weakest existence. He realizes it is impossible to dodge a close-range surprise attack, making his death certain. He desperately questions why this has come to pass. Hellion's mind floods with terror as the thought that he is about to die consumes him, and he mentally pleads for someone to save him. The Ogre's attack connects, sending a spray of blood into the air as Hellion's commanders watch, frozen in the street littered with bodies. The Ogre's jaws clamp down. A lifeless hand falls to the ground. Lev's eyes are wide with horror as she witnesses the fatal blow. Thus, the weakest king, Hellion, was rebelled against by his own citizens, and met his death. Hellion found himself in a dream, a faint realization that what he was experiencing wasn't real. In this dream, a massive enemy army approached. It was a coalition force, composed of elves, dwarves, demons, and even dragons. He vaguely remembered seeing this multi-species army somewhere before. Meanwhile, his own forces were few. Of the 8 seats representing his main pieces, 3 were already broken. With only this one piece left, he knew there was no chance of winning. To Hellion, the world of Tactics Chronicle was a dream. In it, he pursued his ideals, seeking romance and training his friends. He had humbled the strong and saved the weak. He sought to bring peace to the world. He stretched out loving hands to his neighbors. But the result of that dream was the end. It was checkmate, an impossible situation to turn around. No matter how strong his last piece was, it was no match against hundreds of thousands of enemies. He was prepared for this, having destroyed other countries himself while forging 150 years of history, waiting for his own turn to come. When his turn finally came, he was determined to accept the ending gracefully. But deep down he was scared, terrified. However, when the actual ending was right before his eyes, he couldn't help but scream. Hellion's beloved miniature garden was not supposed to have such a terrifying sense of reality. It was supposed to be a fun game, a fantasy. When he raised his head, he saw a blood-stained weapon about to crush his skull. Hellion lets out a terrified scream. He jolts awake in his bed, gasping for breath. He's disoriented, trying to get his bearings. Looking around, he realizes he is in his bedroom. Beside him, Liv watches with a worried expression. With tears in her eyes, Liv calls out his name. Hellion, still confused, recognizes her. Overcome with emotion, she tells him how glad she is that he has finally awoken. Still dazed, Hellion wonders if it was all just a dream. He questions what is happening. He tries to piece his memories together, recalling that he was heading to the place where the rebels were dealt with. The image of the ogre flashes in his mind. Then everything comes back to him. He is certain he died back there but doesn't understand how he is alive. He frantically asks Liv what happened to the ogre leader. She urges him to calm down, explaining that he's been asleep for more than half a day and shouldn't strain himself. Hellion finds it impossible as he doesn't remember sleeping. He concludes that it wasn't a dream. He asks the critical question, did the red ogre kill him? Liv quietly confirms that it did. Hellion processes this revelation. He realizes that the auto-revive function is still working. He remembers that in Tactics Chronicle, the death of the king doesn't mean it's game over. The game's rules state that the king can revive, but there is a limit and a death penalty will be imposed. Getting a hold of himself, Hellion calls to Liv. He asks about the safety of the throne and what happened to the Red Ogre. Liv reports that the throne is safe, guarded by the 2nd Division's elite units, and that all rebels have been eliminated. She adds a crucial detail about the rebel leader, noting that he possessed a unique skill. Hellion listens intently from his bed. Hellion learns about the ogre's unique skill, Last Stand, an ability that activates upon death to strike the nearest enemy. This explains why Liv and Eltina drop their guards, allowing the 5th Division commander, Gardy, to successfully kill the leader. It was Hellion who had recklessly approached the ogre with the unique skill. Overwhelmed with guilt, Liv drops to her knees, apologizing for failing in her duty to protect him and accepting full responsibility. She declares that she is prepared for any punishment he deems fit. Hellion looks down at her, his expression unreadable. Liv remains bowed on the floor, awaiting his judgment. After a moment of silence, Hellion's expression softens. He calls out to Liv, asking her to come closer. As she hesitates, he instructs her to sit on the bed beside him. Liv looks up, surprised and uncertain. Liv cautiously sits on the edge of the bed. Hellion reaches a hand toward her. Tears well up in Liv's eyes as she watches his hand approach, bracing for what she believes is her punishment. But instead of a strike, Hellion gently strokes her head, a comforting gesture that overwhelms her with emotion. Tears stream down her face as she accepts his silent forgiveness and comfort. He pulls her into an embrace, her head resting against his chest. He can feel her heart thumping rapidly with relief and emotion. Her heart pounds against him, a frantic rhythm filling the otherwise silent room. The intimate moment hangs in the air, a silent exchange of comfort and forgiveness. He takes in every detail of the moment, her soft hair, her faint scent, her reddening cheeks, and her heartbeat. He notes the slightly salty taste of her tears on his fingers. Liv, still flustered from the intimate moment, looks up at him. After comforting her, Hellion looks away, confirming that there is no sign of an approaching army, unlike in his dream. He concludes that everything he saw, the horde of monsters surrounding the throne, was just a dream. All 8 commanders are alive and the country is safe. However, he realizes with certainty that this moment with Leave is very real. Hellion asks if there were any other problems besides the ogre rebellion. Leave becomes flustered, stammering an apology. Noticing her distress, Hellion gently tells her to calm down and that she doesn't need to force herself to speak. Having composed herself, Leave reports that there are no major threats to the kingdom, only a few minor issues. Hellion asks about the other commanders. Leave explains that they are continuing their duties. She adds that Eltina and Gardi are managing their respective divisions while awaiting news of his condition. Hellion instructs Leave to have Gardi continue maintaining public order, granting him permission to use his own judgment unless a direct order is given. Leave questions the decision, surprised. Hellion clarifies that although he died from a rebellion in Gardi's jurisdiction, he cannot afford to waste manpower, as the Ogre rebellion was unpredictable. He continues issuing orders. Eltina is to help repair damaged buildings and treat the wounded, and coordination between divisions must improve. Balon is to be informed that the rebels have been suppressed, and security should return to normal. Suddenly, he mentions that he is getting hungry, and Leave immediately offers to have food brought to him. As he gets out of bed, Hellion finds himself thinking about the term role-playing, which is to act in accordance with the settings that have been created. He, Misaki Tsukasa, is someone who enjoys role-playing. But now that he is a king, he realizes he cannot speak in a careless manner. He feels glad that he learned proper table manners, as it helps him in his desire to role-play as a king. After a maid serves him, he dismisses her, stating that Leave is all he needs. Taking a sip from his cup, he finds the drink delicious. He reflects that it never tasted this good when he drank it in the game Tactics Chronicle. He recalls a similar feeling when he drank something in Latestwood. He concludes that this is most likely reality. The impossible events of the past 24 hours have forced him to begin accepting it. With this realization, he decides on a new policy, a new goal. His goal is to return to his original world. He wants to leave this place and go home. Though he spent his youth playing and loving Tactics Chronicle as a game, this is different. To get back, he must first find out why he is in this situation, but he currently has too little information to even form a hypothesis. He ponders the difference between Tactics Chronicle and this world. He can still use the game system features, like menus for tactical support, data sharing, communication, and logs. He also remembers that other people not being able to see his window was also a feature in the game. He then considers the revive friendly skill. In Tactics Chronicle, monsters could be resurrected, but several conditions had to be met. Firstly, only residents of the player's kingdom could be resurrected. Secondly, the player must know the monster's full name. Thirdly, only monsters that died within the last 24 hours can be resurrected. Lastly, there's a limit. Each subordinate can only be brought back twice. The Alchimera Kingdom is surrounded by a dangerous forest called the Abyss and is caught in a war between Latestwood and Noblewood. He has only found 2 other forces in the vicinity. Realizing a rebellion has already occurred, he understands he can't ignore internal affairs while exploring the outside world. He considers the grim possibility of another rebellion. He recalls a critical rule: everyone can only be resurrected a certain number of times, and the king is no different. He confirms his own limits. His maximum number of lives is 6. Since he died earlier, he only has 5 left. If he dies 5 more times, it will be game over. In Tactics Chronicle, game over means the complete erasure of character data. Finishing his meal, he contemplates the consequences of using up all his lives. Having finished his food, Hellion stands and walks to the window, Leave following him. He turns to her, stating that he needs to make sure of one thing. He calls out to Leave, getting her attention. Acknowledging that his question might seem strange, he asks her to answer it as she pleases. After she nervously agrees, he asks for her thoughts on weak beings. Leave of the Managarm leads the 1st Division's elite guards. The 2nd Division's Beast Knights are commanded by the Sword Lion, Balon. Leading the 3rd Division's Holy Spirit Warriors is the Ancient Elf, Eltina. The 4th Division's Magic Troops are led by the Heretic Elf, Seals. The 5th Division of Giants is commanded by Orgelmir Gardi. The 6th Division of Ghosts is under the command of the Nightmare Empress, Camilla. The 7th Division of Mechanics is led by the mixed-race youth, Robin. The 8th Division of Heaven Dragons is commanded by the Ragnarok Dragon, Nogod. The king addresses his commanders, telling them to raise their heads. He explains that he has summoned them all to confirm their current situation and discuss future policy. The king states that they are on an unknown continent and have learned of the local elves and half-elves from Leave. He admits that despite gaining some information, the circumstances of this land are completely unfamiliar to him. He explains that he checked his window and map but couldn't find any information, confirming this is a different place. Noticing a stir among his commanders, he asks if anyone has a question. Leave speaks up, asking him to clarify what a window and map are. The king describes the window as a phantom board that only he can see. He explains that the map is a feature he uses to obtain a large amount of information. He internally wonders if his commanders are unaware of his abilities. He hopes that if they believe he possesses mysterious powers, it will reduce the chance of rebellion. Dismissing the topic, the king states that the information they gathered from Latestwood is insufficient. They are unaware of what forces might rival them in this new land. He declares this a serious situation, emphasizing the need for more information to establish a long-term policy. The king calls on Balan. He asks for a direct report on the state of public order. Balan reports that while the citizens panicked during the rebellion, they regained their composure after hearing it was suppressed. He expresses concern about the stress levels of the citizens and soldiers. He notes that although their army can handle any threat, the current situation is far too unique. He believes the people's stress will continue to rise without a concrete solution. The king listens thoughtfully. Balan explains that since monsters are followers of power, their anxiety is natural and cannot be resolved by power alone. He then raises a problem with residency. People who came to the capital for the festival have no place to stay, as the inns are full and the military camp has exceeded its capacity. After considering the report, the king says he has a plan. He calls for Gardi, who immediately acknowledges the summons. The king commends Gardi for his role in suppressing the rebels. Gardi insists he wouldn't dare let the king die on his watch. He declares he has no excuses and is fully prepared for any punishment. The king acknowledges this and prepares to pass his judgment. The king orders the 5th Division to build temporary housing under the 7th Division commander's instructions. He adds that for any security problems, Gardi will act under Balan's orders. The king addresses Gardi directly. The king declares this to be Gardi's punishment and asks if he understands. He privately worries if the punishment is too harsh. He reaffirms that a king must reward good work and punish bad, understanding that his own death was an accident. The king demands an answer, wondering if Gardi finds it humiliating to work under Balan. Gardi tearfully asks if it is really okay to be given such a punishment. The king is baffled, realizing Gardi is not discontent with the punishment at all. Gardi quickly apologizes for his slip of the tongue and accepts the order. The king acknowledges his acceptance. He then addresses Leave and Eltina, telling them to focus on their mission first and that he will inform them of their punishment later. He announces his plan to visit Latestwood again, with Leave and Eltina continuing as his bodyguards. Leave attempts to speak, but King Hellion interrupts. He asserts that Latestwood is their most crucial source of information and reasons that it would be best for those who have already visited to return and gather more intelligence. He then asks if his logic is wrong. Hellion then addresses Camilla, informing her that she will also accompany him to Latestwood. Surprised, she asks him to elaborate. He clarifies that her duty will not be to guard him. Her primary task will be to gather all kinds of information from the residents of Latestwood. Camilla understands, realizing he wants to utilize her special skills, and Hellion confirms he is counting on her. He offers a metaphor to explain her importance. He tells her she is like Alchimera's ears and that he has high hopes for her to fulfill this crucial role. Moved by his words, Camilla kneels and solemnly vows to live up to his expectations, leaving Hellion momentarily taken aback by her fervent response. The other commanders watch the exchange with varying expressions, while Leave appears more pensive. Confused by the sudden shift in atmosphere, Hellion feels the gazes of his commanders, sensing they all have something to say. He notes that while the others are expectant, Camilla's expression is uniquely boastful. Suddenly, a look of realization dawns on Hellion's face. He finally understands the situation. He turns to Leave, his close aide, designating her as Alchimera's eyes. He hopes that she will continue to oversee all of his steps. Next, he addresses Balan, declaring him to be Alchimera's claws, meant to shred their enemies. He tells Balan that he expects those claws to be fully sharpened for any future emergencies. He then turns to Eltina, appointing her as Alchimera's main, a symbol of magnificence to display their prowess to other countries. Finally, he addresses Seals, naming her Alchimera's tongue, whose powerful arts and magic can turn the very land to ash. Hellion continues, designating Gardi with his exceptional strength as Alchimera's arms, before which no fortress is unbreakable. He then names Raban, who supports the kingdom with his numerous tools, as Alchimera's feet. He trusts that Raban's cutting-edge armaments will grant their army even greater power. Lastly, Hellion turns to Nagard. He calls him Alchimera's wings, the ruler of the skies, and expresses his hope that Nagard will continue to be their greatest firepower. Nagard bows his head in acceptance, acknowledging his king's command. With all roles assigned, Hellion rallies his commanders, declaring that he expects a great deal from them and ordering them to take action. In unison, they roar their affirmation. Meanwhile, in a forest settlement, chaos erupts as the village is attacked. A young woman is captured, struggling against her captors and crying out to be released. An elven soldier reports to their superior that while they have conquered the settlement, the travelers they sought are nowhere to be found. However, they have captured a tainted individual they presume to be royalty, the struggling Lilitha. Another elf fiercely demands they unhand Lilitha, threatening dire consequences if she is harmed. The superior officer silences the defiant elf with a brutal kick as Lilitha watches in horror. The officer coldly tells the filth to stop talking. Disgusted, the superior officer remarks that the captive's cries will make their ears rot. Believing this brutal display will serve as an adequate message for the travelers they are hunting, they give the order to depart. A lone king cries out to his army, Alchimera, asking for the location of the claws that would shred their enemies in his stead. A powerful warrior responds, declaring that Alchimera's claws are present. A beastly warrior proclaims that their army's sacred number is 2, and that they are the claws who fight for their courageous king. The king continues, questioning the whereabouts of the mane that signifies their power. In response to the king's call, a voice announces that Alchimera's mane is here. An elven woman reveals herself, stating that the sacred number given to her division is 3. She declares that they are the mane, a symbol of power acting on behalf of their thoughtful king. The king's call echoes again, this time for the tongue that repels evil. A mage responds that Alchimera's tongue is present, bearing the sacred number 4. They are the tongue that repels magic on behalf of the supreme king. Next, the king demands to see the arms that can break through walls. A towering, muscular warrior steps forward, announcing that Alchimera's arms have arrived. His division, bearing the sacred number 5, are the arms that fight for their gallant king. The assembled army roars with thunderous approval. Above the crowd, the king calls out for the ears that perpetually listen. A woman with bat-like wings answers the call, declaring that Alchimera's ears are here. With the sacred number 6, they are the ears that listen on behalf of their immaculate king. The king then asks for the feet that support their large kingdom. A young boy and his company of dwarves respond, proclaiming they are Alchimera's feet. As number 7, they support the kingdom for their pioneer king. Finally, the king makes one last appeal to Alchimera. He calls for the wings that govern the sky in his place. A voice from the sky confirms that Alchimera's wings are indeed present. A winged man descends, shouting that as number 8, they are the wings that rule the sky for their solitary king. The weakest king, Hellion, then addresses his entire army, the peerless chimeras who govern their own will, and prepares to give his command. With his army fully assembled, Hellion gives the order. All troops are to move out, destroy their enemies, and use their peerless power to save every one of their new brethren. In response to their king's command, the entire army lets out a unified, deafening battle cry. From another place, an elf girl watches in stunned silence. It was in this moment that Alchimera uttered its first cry, declaring its formidable existence in another world. Seeing the king and his unparalleled army, the girl was convinced that this force, Alchimera, would fundamentally change every principle rooted in her land. A rat scurries along a beam, overlooking the imprisoned elves below. A heavily bandaged elf expresses her sorrow to Lilitha, feeling responsible for their imprisonment because she failed to protect her. Lilitha tells her companion not to move, dismissing her own injuries and insisting that the other elf must take care of herself. Lilitha puts on a brave face, telling her companion to rest and not to worry about her. One of the elves realizes that Lilitha, their majesty, is not with them and must be locked up somewhere else. Another elf expresses her firm belief that Nisama and the traveler will definitely come to save them. When one captive questions if they can really trust the traveler, another insists that it is safe to do so. She reminds the others that Hellion is an amazing person who already saved Nisama from the elves' chief hunter. She recalls that Hellion had already promised her he would help as much as he could. An armored guard bangs on the cell bars, yelling for the filth inside to come out. A bandaged elf shouts back in anger, but Lilifer holds her back, telling her to stop. The other captives demand to know what the guard plans to do to Lilifer and insist on being taken too. The guard smirks, telling them contemptuously that their turn has not come yet. As Lilifer is led away, her friends call out to her in distress. She grasps her companion's hand, telling her not to worry. Lilifer reassures them, asking them to trust her and believe that Nisama will definitely save them. She tries to keep their spirits high, certain that everyone will be able to return safely. Hellion reflects that while his speech was a success, the enemy's full strength remains a mystery, and he cannot afford to make a single mistake. Hellion's companion informs him that they are about to enter Noblewood's territory. He expresses his doubt, wondering if their enemies can truly be trusted to follow through with the exchange. She reassures him, explaining that the vow they made in the name of the divine tree is an absolute promise passed down since ancient times. If they were to ever break that vow, they would be labeled as disgraces and become the enemy of all elves. The group stands before the imposing, fortified gate of a Noblewood settlement. Hellion gives a direct order to his companions, forbidding them from attacking without his command, which they acknowledge. Inside the settlement, they are met by several Noblewood elves, including their captain Salawin. The elven woman with Hellion announces to the Noblewood elves that she has brought the travelers as they demanded. Salawin simply chuckles and tells them to come this way. Helt recalls a painful memory. For elves, an oath made under the divine tree is absolute. However, this sacred promise holds no weight when made with a half-elf. The elf leader smugly declared there was no need to honor an oath made to the tainted. He recalls with amusement the spectacle Cuckoo made, who until her very last breath held on to the hope that help would arrive. The memory of their cruel laughter echoes. Returning to the present, Helt and his companions arrive, their presence marked by a surge of power. On the ramparts of the elven encampment, a guard senses a strange disturbance. He asks his comrade if he saw it too. He describes a bizarre sensation, as if the very forest was bending around them. As the elves' mocking laughter rings in his ears, he finally understands. Helt kneels, overwhelmed by the memory. He condemns himself for his past foolishness. He had believed a peaceful resolution through diplomacy was possible, but now sees it was a grave misunderstanding. He declares that they are no longer elves, having forsaken any semblance of humanity. The elves look on in shock as a massive isolation barrier begins to envelop their entire city. Consumed by rage, Helt roars that he no longer acknowledges them as beings of integrity, but as vile pests and a blight upon humanity. As the sky seems to shatter above, an immense, heavily armored army materializes, led by a formidable lion-like warrior. Panic erupts among the elven ranks as they shout that they're under attack. The leader, in disbelief, wonders where such a force came from, questioning if they have allied with the humans. Helt stands resolute, flanked by his companions. He declares that this is not war but pest extermination. He issues his command to his army, Al-Chimera, annihilate every last